We're going to cover Microsoft Excel, and I'm going to start right at the very beginning. And I know a lot of you are experienced Excel users, but this is for anyone that isn't. And even if you're thinking, well, I'm going to sit through it anyway, even though I know how it works, that's still a good thing to do, because there might be some things that are really simple, but you just didn't realise because no one's ever shown you. Or there might be things that trigger questions that you think like, I wanted to know about so-and-so. And like I say, ask questions at any point, or email requests, or ask requests, or even if you think, that reminds me of something I want to do in Word, then just let me know one way or another, and then we can either cover that today or at some point next week. So I should get started then. Okay, this, hopefully, the thing that's displayed on your screen is Microsoft Excel. This is a 2016 version, I think. Let me have a look. No, I'm not going to look because it'll display the license information. No one wants to see that. What I'll do is I'll click here and just do this. Right. Okay. Yeah, this is 2016, which isn't the latest version, but it's almost identical to the latest version, 2019. There's a few extra features in the new one, but nothing we're going to talk about today. The screen layout is pretty much identical. What we have, let's move that thing out of the way, the thing that you can't see, hopefully. What we have at the top here is something called the title bar. And a title bar, that appears in all applications. It tells you the name of the application and the name of the document. If the document hasn't got a name, like this one, then it'll call it Book 1. If you've already got Book 1, it'll call it Book 2, etc., etc. On the right-hand side over here, we've got the Windows controls. We've got Minimize, which sends it to the bottom of the screen, doesn't save anything, so if you suddenly have a power cut, there's a good chance you'll lose it. There's Restore Down, and there's Close. Close, again, doesn't save anything, but if you hit Close, it'll endeavour to close it, and if it hasn't been saved, it'll ask you to save it. One in the middle, Restore Down, if I click on that, it puts it into a resizable, repositionable state. Now, I don't know what will happen on the webinar if I do that, so I don't know if I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I might just break everything. But that would allow me to have an Excel window open alongside a Word window or a web page if I want to cross-reference things. Or if I wanted to cut and paste things out of Excel and put them into an email, I could use Restore Down and then just drag and drop the data. On the left-hand side, we had the Quick Access Toolbar. Howard, are you saying hello? Have we got a question?
Sorry, I should say good morning to Dave.
Yeah,
carry on.
As you work, carry on.
Naughty student today, sorry.
And sit at the back of the class.
I'll make up the time.
The front of the class if you know. I can't remember. Anyway. So we have the Quick Access Toolbar over here, and again, this is something that appears in all the Office applications. It gives you the useful features that you're most likely to use most of the time. It gives you the Save button. I kind of get sick of explaining what a Save button is these days, because when I explain that it's an icon of a disk, people go, but it's square. And then I explain that disks used to be square, and then they go, okay. And what's a disk again? And so now I just say, there's a little picture of a life jacket there. That's the Save button. And that allows you to save your document. We've got Undo, Redo, and a few other things. If you want to add things to the Quick Access Toolbar, you can click on the drop-down arrow to the right of it. And all the really popular ones there are available to add. So you can just tick one of those buttons. Oh, the spell check's quite a useful one to have on there. Not really. But anyway, it could be. And if I tick that, that's going to stay there available on my Excel login, on my profile, forever, unless it's not working properly. If I decide I don't want it, I can right mouse click on it and say remove. And if I click on the drop down to the right of it and go down to more commands, it lists even more commands. And then here, if I change it from popular to all, it lists every single feature and function that's available in Excel, some of which you can't even get to through the normal menu systems. So it's crazy things, whether you want to add a text bullet to Smart Art, or whether you wanted to speak the contents of the cells. or see more stock charts. All you do is you choose the thing you want and then double click on it and it adds it to the quick access toolbar. Well, it does when you say OK. And it's there. But I don't want that either, so I'm going to get rid of it. So let's remove that. So that's the top bit. Below that, we've got something called the ribbon. No one calls it the ribbon, but that's the Microsoft name for it. Basically, it's a combination of a toolbar and a menu all put together. And for those people on the planet that don't know about ribbons, the way they work is about 13 years ago, Microsoft redesigned it so that the menu systems, which were a bit dated and had things in the wrong places, finally had things in the right places, which really confused people. And this ribbon meant that if you was trying to put something into your document, you could find it easily. Even now, people are still confused by the fact that things are in the right places. So, for example, if you wanted to do a spell check, a lot of people look at Excel and go, "Why doesn't it have a spell check anymore?" So, of course, it's got a spell check. It's just you have to think about when you're going to use the spell check. You'd use a spell check at the end of formatting your document, when you're fine-tuning it and you're reviewing the contents and you're about to print it or email it. So you just got to choose the right tab for that. So we go to the Review tab, and hey presto, there's a spell check. Equally, if you wanted to insert a pivot table is a data function. It's all about data. It's for manipulating data. So if you want to insert a pivot table, you go to the Insert tab, because you're inserting something into the document. And so things are in the right place. You just sometimes need to kind of think about it in a lateral manner. So on the Home tab, we've got all the popular stuff. And each of these groups contains all the features that relate to that group. So for example, if I wanted to do some font formatting, the great news is every single thing to do with font formatting is within that font group. If I hover over one of the buttons, it will tell me what it does. And if I can't find it on a button, then most groups, or many groups, have a little fly out in the bottom right-hand corner. What that does, if I click on it, is it opens an old-style dialog box. And this old dialog box contains a more comprehensive set of options. So, for example, doing something like strike through. You can't do that on the normal font group, but you can do it here. Strike through is an incredibly useful feature where it makes it that you cross something out, which I'm sure people find very useful. However, that's the flyout. Then we have the formula bar. The formula bar is really useful, believe it or not. It tells you which cell you're in this case A1, or in this case I7, and it tells you the exact contents of the cell. So if your spreadsheet has the number 100 displayed on the screen, then if you look at the formula bar, we can see whether that is just the number 100 or whether it's the result of a calculation that equals 100. And so the formula bar displays the formula, oddly enough. Then we've got the spreadsheet, that's this bit here, the main work area. I'll come back to that in a second. And down the bottom, we've got the status bar. And there's a few things displayed down there. Most of the time it says ready or saving or opening. If I right click on the status bar, I can add things to that. I can switch things on and off. And you can see loads of things are switched on. That's because all the useful stuff is already switched on. There are things like caps lock and nums lock which aren't switched on. That's because that's not incredibly useful. If I tick the one that says caps lock, now it means that when the caps lock on, it will say caps. That's why it's not on by default. And if I turn my caps lock on, yeah, it says caps lock. So that's not a useful feature. Or some people might find it useful. If I right mouse click, I can turn that back off again, just for the sake of the next training session. However, what is really useful and is normally switched on all the time is the zoom slider and the zoom control. To the right here, we see the zoom slider and the actual percentage. And again, this is something that appears in most Microsoft Office applications. And it allows us to zoom in and out to make the screen bigger or smaller without affecting the formatting. So here, for example, the screen is just about the right size for my screen. However, as I'm old and have to wear reading glasses, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to zoom in. And I can do that by using the plus to zoom in or double clicking on the percentage and adjusting it. Or if I want to be really big and clever, I can hold down the control key and use the wheel and zoom in like so. I'm not quite at this stage yet, but put it to that stage, I could probably get away without wearing the glasses at all. So there we can see that's all blimmin' heck, 175%. That is big. So that's the zoom slider. Okay, so that's the main screen layout. Now we've got to look at the actual spreadsheet. It's in the middle. And before we do that, I'm going to sip some coffee. So, spreadsheet. Spreadsheet is a grid of cells. Every cell has a unique reference which consists of a column letter and a row number. So here, for example, I'm in D4, and if I click here, I'll be in G3. See the reference up there, just in case we can't work out where we are. And that's all very wonderful. Now, the idea of a spreadsheet is that you can put 3 different kinds of things in a cell. You can put text in a cell, which is anything that contains text. So if I type in hello, that's text. You can put a number in a cell, which is anything that is exclusively a number. So if I type 10, that's a number. If I type 10A, then that's text. Or the third thing that you can put in a cell is a calculation. And a calculation is anything that starts with an equal sign. So if I want to do 1 plus 1, if I type 1 plus 1 in, that's text. But if I put an equal sign in front of it, it will give me the result of the calculation. Simple as that. Easy, huh? Yeah, good. So if I type some text in, let's have some sales bread. Highly technical stuff. Sales. You type things into a cell and hit return. That's quite a big part of the exercise as well later on. I'm going to type some numbers in now. I've got some text, and I can do 10, 20, and then down here I want to do a calculation. All I want to do in this calculation, or in this really basic spreadsheet, is add the contents of B1 to B2. So I just want to add that one to that one. So I just put an equal sign because it's a calculation, and then rather than saying 10 plus 20, I'll say B1 plus B2. And then I hit return. The 2 things are added together. Hey! And if the contents of one of those changes, then the result changes, which is the whole point of having a spreadsheet, that you reference the cells, and then the contents of the cells change, and then the result changes. I know this is incredibly basic, but I did warn you. So hopefully some people are finding it useful. Other people, you just put it back when you want to go to sleep later. So what I'm going to do now is move on to something that's a little more interesting. I'm going to move on to Autofill. Okay, so Autofill is a great tool for speeding up spreadsheet creation. And I explained this all the other day, so anyone that was sat in on it, feel free to nod off for a minute. It's the tool that allows you to do things like enter a month name, and then rather than having to retype it several times, you can just go and have month names across the screen like that, which is really handy. It works like this. All you do is hover over the little blob in the bottom right hand corner. Now if I hover anywhere else, I get a crosshair and a pointer, and then if I click and drag, they'll move that cell, which is a quick way of moving things around the screen. However, if I hover over that little blob in the bottom right hand corner, I just get this little thin crosshair. Now if I click and drag, it will continue that series of data, and you can see in the highlight how far I've gone. And if I go too far, I can go back a few. But all I do is drag it to the right to continue the series of data. I can drag it down to continue the series of data. I can drag it to the left to go backwards through the series of data. I can drag it up to go backwards through the series of data. And if I drag it diagonally, it does nothing because that'd be silly. But it works with month names, it works with abbreviated month names, it works with days of the week, it works with abbreviated days of the week, it works with anything that's got a number next to it. Let's do some things with numbers next to them. It works with calculations. So I've done a calculation down the bottom here that did lots of things to the numbers above it. I can also fill it across and it will adjust accordingly. It works with dates. So I can put in 1st of June and autofill that down the page. and it works with sequences. So, for example, if I wanted the first month in each quarter, I could put Jan, April, and then if I select both of those, I can autofill it down and give me the first month in each quarter. If I wanted every other day, I could put Mon and Wed. I could put them in full, but I'm not typing Wednesday, not at this point in the week. It'll give me every other day. And if I wanted, let's get a bit of space here. If I wanted the 1st of June to be followed by the 1st of July, then I just need to select both of those and drag it down, and it will give me 1st of each month. I can use any sequence. So if I wanted the 1st of June followed by the 8th of June, I could just select both of those and autofill it down, and it will give me every 7 days, or I could do every 12 days, whatever I wanted to do. We can also do this with text. So if we have different offices, I can select the different offices and I can autofill those down the page so that I can put in hotel expenses, petrol expenses, eating expenses, whatever. And if I really wanted to, I could even add those into the system so that it remembers those sequences. And then in future, I don't need to type those in. So if I just delete the offices there and go to File, Options, Advanced, and then scroll all the way to the bottom and then click in the middle of the screen, really easy to find. You get Edit Custom Lists. Then here is the box for adding entries. And I can either select a list, like the one that I had a minute ago, but I just deleted, or click on Add and I can just type a list. So if I say New York, comma, Paris, comma, Milan, comma, Margate, then click on Add. Then I've got the fashion capitals of the world added in there. So I'm clicking OK and OK again. Now if I type any of these things in any of my spreadsheets in future, I can use that as an autofill list. It might look a bit weird, but if you've got a situation where every time you create a spreadsheet, you put the same 20 cost centers down the side, or the same 50 people's names, or you use some bizarre headings that always go across the top, then if you do it almost every time you create a new spreadsheet, then adding it into your profile by doing that means that you don't have to do it ever again. So we achieve that by going to File, Options, Advanced, scroll all the way to the bottom, and then click on Edit Custom Lists. Just rolls off the tongue. Here's our existing lists, and there's the one with New York, Paris, and that Malark key, which I don't want anymore, so I'm going to hit delete. It's permanently deleted. Oh no! Okay. And okay. And finally, we get numbers. Now, if I think, oh, I just want to have numbers 1 to 10 down the screen, obviously I'm going to autofill it. So type 1 in there, hit return, click on 1, hover over the little blob, autofill it down the page, and then, oh, it gives me 1 all the way down the page. Now, this is because when you autofill a number, Excel is not just going to make any assumptions because it's numbers and it wants to be really sure about how it deals with numbers. So instead, what you have to do, you have to tell it to do something. And we do that by hovering over the autofill handle, or the fill handle, drag it down. Oh, something strange.
We've lost the screen, yeah. Yeah, we've lost the screen.
Oh, okay, let me get that back. Is that back? Yeah.
No. Oh, yeah, it is now.
Yeah. Okay. This is as bad as yesterday. I don't think it's being hacked. I just think it's probably overworked. Okay, good. Let me just check that it's Where's this? Oh, there's the button. Share content. Screen 1. Right, good. Okay. Share multimedia. No, don't want to do that. It's part of my really ultra smooth presentation. Yeah, that's definite. Actually, I should be showing this instead.
We've lost you.
We're back in a second. Hang on.
Yeah,
And I should stop sharing. Oh no, share that. Stop sharing that and share that. Right. Okay. Let's start again. Cancel. Is it back on Excel now?
yeah.
Good. Okay. Technology, eh? Right. Moving on. So, the chat window's disappeared now. Oh no, I won't know if people are talking to me. Right, let's put it back up there. So, numbers. If I want to autofill a number and I go to autofill it, it'll just give me the same number, which is not what I want right now. I want to increase the number. The only thing you can do when you're autofilling to change the outcome other than selecting more cells is, as you're autofilling it, hold down the control key. And what that'll do is it'll do the opposite of what it was going to do. So with numbers, rather than just giving me 1 all the way down the page, I let go of the mouse, let go of control, and give me 1 to 10. And equally, if I wanted it to say department 1 all the way down the page, if I drag it down, it will say department 1 to 9. But if I hold down the control key whilst I'm dragging it, and then let go of the mouse, and then let go of control, it'll just give me 1. Okay, so it toggles it basically. So what I'm going to do now is get rid of all that lot, and I'm going to create a basic spreadsheet that has January to April, we'll do, and area. I'm going to put sales area 1 down to 4. Now what I've done there is I've put in an area, and I've put in a title on the side and some titles across the top. But this title's too big; it's overlapping the next cell. Now, if ever that happens and the next cell contains anything, then as soon as it contains something, it will just chop the end off and it will hide that bit of title, which is fine. If it's text, it doesn't matter. If it's a number, it'll do something completely different. We'll come back to that. Now, it's not gone anywhere. It means you just need to resize the column. There's a whole bunch of ways of doing that. The easiest way is to hover over the dividing line, click and drag, and that's resized it. And if I want to do a whole bunch of columns, I can click and select all the columns and then choose any one of the dividing lines and drag, and it will resize them all at the same time, make them a nice uniform size. Now, when you do that with text, when it's too big for the cell, like I say, just overlaps the next one, and then if the next one has something put in it, it'll just chop the end off. With numbers, it won't do that because numbers are too important. If a number's too big, it'll do one of 3 things. It'll either automatically resize the cell, depending on the formatting, or it will turn it into hash marks, so it'll look like that, or it'll put it into scientific format, so it looks like this. Now, if ever that happens with your numbers, and you think, what on earth's going on? Don't panic, just resize the columns. So if I put a really big number in here, for example, you'll see it converted it to scientific format, which looks horrible. But if I put in a whole bunch of numbers of different sizes, what I can do is something called best fit. And best fit is pretty ugly. If you select the columns and double click on any one of these, it will resize the column to the widest bit of data that's in it. And it's great, it works really quickly. Get rid of that red herring down there. But it does look pretty horrible, and so it's better to just resize the columns to a nice uniform manner, because otherwise they look really untidy. And then what I'm going to do here, I'm going to get rid of that area there, don't need that one. What I'm going to do here is just put in some numbers. So let's put some 2-digit numbers. Just got something to work with. I don't want numbers that big. 2-digit numbers. Okay, let's just change that one. Okay, so now I'm going to do some totals, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that column up. So to do that, I could say we've got B3 there. Actually, I'm going to get rid of that row 1. Let's just delete that. Okay. So you've got B2 is the first one, and then 3 and 4, and I could just say equals B2 plus B3 plus B4, which would work, but it'd be a bit tedious. If I had hundreds of entries, it would be almost impossible. So whenever you do something in Excel that's either tedious or impossible with normal maths, there's a function to make it easier. And so the first function most people learn is sum, which works like this. Starts with an equals, because it's calculation, followed immediately by sum, which is then followed immediately by an open bracket. Function names aren't case sensitive. And when you're typing a formula in generally, it's best to type it in lowercase anyway, because then if you mess up, when you hit return, it'll capitalize all the bits that are correct, and the bits that aren't correct, it will leave them in lowercase. The sum function is only to be used for taking a range of cells and adding them all together. So if you want to say 10 plus 10, you don't put sum in front of it. Some people put sum in front of it. There's no need though. It will slow things down eventually, and it's unnecessary typing. So instead, you use the sum function for taking a range. And by a range, I mean something like A1 to Z99. So it would be like A1 colon Z99. So here, I'm going to say B2, because it's that one, and then colon. And then I'm going to say the last one that I want to include, which is B5. Now, you might think, well, what's the point of including that space? If I said B4, then what it would have done is it would have worked perfectly. But by including the space, it means later on, if I insert a row after B4, because it's within B5, it will include that in the range. It'll adjust the range accordingly. Anyway, close the brackets, hit return, and there's my total. Yeah, easy. Now, anyone that's familiar with the auto sum feature, the little Greek letter sigma over here, you're thinking, why don't you just click on that and hit return and let it do the work for you? Of course, that works, but it doesn't always do what I want it to do. If I just click on it now, it guesses the calculation, which in this case is incorrect. So now I can select the correct cells and hit return. But having said that, I don't need to. I only need to do it right on the first one, because I've done it correctly there. We can use our old friend Autofill. If I hover over the blob, drag it across to the right, it'll autofill. And we can see by looking in the formula bar, that's B2 to B5, and then we've got D2, D5, E2 to E5, etc., etc. So that's the sum function, really easy. What we do now is run through the rest of the basic 5, and they are min, max, average, and count. And if I work going across, what is going on in the Lambert household? So much, so much movement. Anyway, I just can't take the camera off. So if I want to work across the top now to get the minimum value, I'd say equals min, open brackets, and then I'm going to choose the whole range again. I'm going to say from B2 over to F2, close brackets, hit return, and that gives me the minimum value. And if any of them were lower than 12, then it would say that instead. Same thing with max, equals max, open brackets, select the cells. And again, I'm including the space in case I want to add the rest of the months. Close brackets, hit return. Average, you've got to type the whole word, which is really tedious, but what I could do, of course, is use the auto sum function, which to the right of it has got a drop down, and then I can click on average. And again, I can select the cells, return. And I can do the same thing for this one. Count numbers. If I select the cells, hit return, there we go. Let me just delete that cell there. Boom. So now if I select all of these and autofill down the page, that will give me all the basic functions. Good. Okay, so we can do more calculations now, or I can do error messages. Who wants to see error messages?
Yeah.
Error messages.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah.
Okay, good. This will add a level of excitement. Have I got any freezing cold coffee to drink? Yeah. Now, if I autofill this all the way to the bottom, like so, I'll get to this. Now, that basically means that I've got a total row at the bottom that means nothing. And I've got this interesting thing going on here. Now, if you ever do this and it comes up with that error message, when it displays the word div, it's not making a personal comment about your ability of creating spreadsheets. What it's doing is it's saying that you're trying to divide by 0. If there's one thing that computers hate, it's dividing by 0. And the reason why is because you can't divide by 0. So if you have 100 and you divide it by 0, what do you get? An error message because you can't divide by 0. You can multiply by 0, but you can't divide by it. Now, the reason it's trying to divide by 0 is because what the average function is doing is saying, right, what's the total of all these cells added together? Well, 0, there's nothing in there. How many of these cells have got numbers in? Well, 0. So it's saying to get the average, divide 0 by 0, which of course comes up an error message. There's a variety of things we can do to fix that. Well, it's 3 things. We could use the if error function that we briefly covered the other day. So I could say if error, open bracket, put the function in that I've got in there, then put comma, and then put what I want to see rather than an error message. And I could just put in speech mark, and it would display nothing. Or I could put something meaningful in the speech marks, like let's say NA, that's always a popular thing. Close the brackets, hit return, and I'll get that rather than getting an error message. Or get nothing rather than an error message. Or just leave it how it was and accept the fact that there's an error message. So, one way of getting rid of that error message is to put an if error around it. Another way would be to put something in these cells. So if I was just waiting for the area 4 figures, I could put a 0 in there. And as soon as I put at least 1 0 in, it will stop displaying an error because it's now saying, how many of those cells have got something in? 1. What's the total of them? 0. And so it's 0 divided by 1, which you can do because that's allowed in maths. But the easiest way to fix it is just to select all of those and press the small delete key just to clear the contents, because I don't want the row anyway. So that is that's one of the most popular error messages. There's about 5 of them. The other ones are to follow. If I were to do this, if I say 1, 2, and we say equals 1 plus 2, now you see a surprise here. When I hit return, I get an error message. The reason I get that is because it was expecting a value and it got a bit of text. Now, if there was a named range called 1, it'd be quite happy with it, but instead it's come up with hash value. Error messages generally are preceded by the hash mark so that they stand out rather than appearing like you've done something intentional. If I replace that with 1, works a treat. If I were to delete one of these things, if I use the small delete key, it just clears that cell, which is the easiest way of doing it. If you haven't got a small delete key, which is sometimes the case, believe it or not, if you're working on a Chromebook, for example, if I right mouse click, I can select clear contents, which is the same as pressing the small delete key. If, however, you delete, which is the next one up, what that'll do is it'll come up with a screen saying, what do you want to do? And people just go, yeah, okay, whatever. Then you get this. Because when you delete a cell, when you actually delete it and not just delete the contents, everything has to move up 1 or move across 1. And when that happens, any calculations that are based on that cell then get trashed and it will display hash ref. The reason for this is because what it said was D9 plus D10. Well, D10 doesn't exist anymore. D10's been deleted, that's gone forever. This isn't really D10. It looks like it's D10, but it's a cell that was formerly known as D11. So for that reason, it's not going to assume that you want it to be the old D11. It will just say D9 plus, error message. And so if you delete something and this suddenly happens, the best thing to do is Control Z to undo it. Then look at the formula and adjust it accordingly. So hash ref just means you've deleted a cell reference or something has caused a cell reference to no longer be there, and it wants you to put in a different reference. Another error message can be caused by doing a simple calculation like equals sum, open bracket, D9 to D11, close bracket, hit return. Error message. Oh gosh, what happened there? If I look at it, I've got the word sum in there rather than the word sum. Obviously, that's not going to work because it doesn't mean anything. But you can see what I meant about lowercase and uppercase earlier. It's capitalised the cell references because they're correct. They all mean something. But the word sum isn't the word sum. So if I now change that to the word sum, when I hit return, bingo, works a treat. And when I look at it again, I can see it's been capitalised because it recognises what we're talking about. The final thing I'm going to do here is in this range of cells, these 3 cells, I've got a space there and I can put another number in. So I could put 7 in there again, that's 10. Yay. Or I could say, oh, I want to include the contents of another cell. If I say equals D12, which is the total, it will include the total in the range of cells that calculates the total, which of course can't work. What happens then is when I hit return, I get an error message, which depending on the version will have either more or less waffle with the dialog box. But basically it's saying you've got a circular reference, which means it's unsolvable. And if I just hit return, it'll go away. But it will leave these things called auditing marks. We can talk about those later on a more technical course one day. They're good fun. That shows that I've got a circular reference, which it can't be solved because it's saying, take these 3 figures, create this figure here, and then put this figure in here, then take these 3 figures and create it, and it just goes round and round and round, which is bonkers. And that's easily fixed. All I need to do is delete that. Simple as that. So those are the 5 key error messages. Hash ref means a cell reference was deleted. Hash value means it was expecting a value and it got a bit of text. Hash name means it was expecting a function name or a named range and it got a piece of text that it didn't understand. Hash div means it doesn't think much of your spreadsheets. No, it means that we're trying to divide by 0. And finally, a circular reference is where you're going around in circles. So that's error messages. The only other thing I've got left to do now is basic calculations. Should we do basic calculations, or does anybody have any questions or requests that they'd like to see? Now would be a great time to ask. Go on, Angela, you know you want to say something.
Oh God, I can't think of anything in a minute.
This is where you go like, how do you do a nested if statement right on the back of doing the most simple Excel stuff ever? But any requests at all, anybody? In a text window if you haven't got a microphone. Calculations, please. Okay, right. We do calculations then. For this, I should require a whiteboard. Let me move that over there, and then down here, I'm going to put a little whiteboard in the corner. By whiteboard, I mean a bunch of cells that are turned into one big one by doing merge and center, and then not center. So, in Excel, we use all the usual mathematical symbols, plus for adding stuff up. I'll make this bigger actually. About that size, I reckon I do. What that size? Yeah. Plus for adding stuff up. Minus for subtracting. Oblique for dividing. Asterisk for multiplying. The thing that you find on the 6 key for doing to the power of, which weirdly enough, not many people use. To the power of is it's really easy to use, just like multiplying or subtracting. You use it between the 2 numbers, and it's for doing things if you want to work out the squared value of something. So you'd say something to the power of 2, or the cubed value of something. So you'd say something to the power of 3. But commercially, not a very popular function. Let's put this on another line. What else? We've got brackets. They're really important. The percent symbol is pretty important too. We'll come to that in a second. And dollar sign, essential, less than, greater than, and I think that about does it. Okay, so this calculation isn't going to work. It's not a calculation, it's just a bit of text. There we go. So all you do with these calculations is just use them the same way you would in maths. And so if I were to type in 10 plus 10 and hit return, what will it display? Go on, somebody, anybody?
20.
No, display an error message because.
Because you I need one on top of the other.
You need an equal sign in front of it.
Yeah.
And then it'll give me 20. Oh, not that cell it won't. Yeah, that's because of the formatting I did a minute ago. Equals 10 plus 10. Hit return. Give me 20. Yeah. It just means you need the equal sign in front of it. That is in scientific format, which means it looks like it's gibberish, but it is not really. What should we do next? Percentages? Yeah, percentages. So percentages are really easy to work with. But before we get to that, I'll explain something else. So if I do 10 plus 10 times 10 and hit return, what will it display? Pressure's on Angela because she's the only person who's got a microphone on. Smart move.
I might give you the wrong answer now.
You're really going red, so it doesn't make any difference. 10 plus 10
I'm not
times
going to
10
answer.
equals.
No.
There we go. I've got some answers. Yeah, I was like, how would I type it into the box but didn't want to say it? Of course, the popular one is 200. People think 10 times 10, 10 plus 10, 20, times 10, 200. Of course, the correct answer is 110. And so, oh yeah, well done. So from family, yes, who supplied 110 in the chat window. Would you care to tell me in the chat window why that is? Or you can use one simple word. Let's see, the tension's building now. That'd be it. Excellent. Right, bid mass. I call it bod mass, but that's because I'm old. Or you can call it bid mass, or you can call it the thing that uses brackets and stuff. Bod mass or bid mass is the order in which things are calculated. Now, I know it sounds like it's turning into a maths lesson, but that's because it is. No, that's because it's important. I need to make that. No, I don't need to make that bigger. Mathematicians, mad scientists, and computers calculate things in a very strict order. Because if you don't do things in the right order, if you don't have rules, it all gets untidy. And so the order in which these things are calculated is described by bod mass or bid mass. If you imagine in the old films where the scientist is in front of a blackboard, you've got all the F's and X's and the squiggles and the brackets and all that kind of stuff. If you just take a run at that and go straight forward and calculate it in exactly the order it's in, you'll get tied up in knots and it will go horribly wrong. And so instead, you have to have rules. And the rule, or this rule, works like this. First of all, you look for the brackets and you do the stuff in the brackets. Then you look for to the power of, or indices, if you're learning it in schools these days. By that we mean this little thing, the to the power of symbol that no one's using anyway, so no one cares. So then we move on to the more obvious stuff: division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. So this isn't an Excel spreadsheet thing. This is a maths thing, but it's essential that you know when you're working with spreadsheets. Otherwise, you can make a really simple mistake, like this one, where you expect it to be 200 and it's actually 110, and it could only be out by like 50, and it could be hundreds of thousands, and you wouldn't notice it. But it'd be wrong, so it'd be no good. And so if we apply the maths rules to this formula, bod mass or bid mass, what it will say is, right, are there any brackets? No. Any to the power of? No. Division? No. Multiplication? Yeah, 10 times 10, that's 100. Any addition? Yep, we've got plus 10 in there, so it's 110. Any subtraction? No. So that gives us 110. Now, had we have wanted 10 plus 10 times 10, then what we'd need to do is use brackets. Then what bod mass or bid mass says is, are there any brackets? Yes. It goes inside the brackets and it starts again. It says, right, are there any more brackets? No. Any to the power of? No. Division? No. Multiplication? No. Addition? Yes. 10 plus 10 is 20. Any subtraction? No. It takes the 20, then it comes outside of the brackets and it continues from where it left off. So it says, is there any to the power of? No. Any division? No. Any multiplication? Yes, times 10. So 20 times 10 is 200. Any addition? No. Any subtraction? No. And when I hit return, I get my 200. Ta-da! Easier. BODMAS is really, or BIMMAS, depending which one you use, is really important because, as I said, in an Excel formula, it can make something go wrong, but also it just helps in general maths and makes you look big and clever if someone does a maths quiz on Facebook or something and you're the one person that knows how to use brackets properly. So, moving on from that, what I want to do now is do some percentages, and then I reckon that'll be it. So, in here, I'm going to put that unheard of word that seldom gets referred to these days, and I'm going to calculate a percentage. I'm going to do 5% of that figure there. Now, percentages can be done in a variety of ways. I'm going to use my new improved whiteboard. They can be done by saying equals something. It's going to be really messy on the screen. I can say equals, let's say, I was looking at B6. I could say equals B6 divided by 100, which would give me 1%. If I want to get 5%, I could say times 5. That would give me 5%. And that would work, but that would be really messy and really time consuming. So I could push those two parts of the calculation together, the divide by and the multiply, and I could end up with equals B6 times 0.05. If I divide 5 by 100, I get 0.05. And so I could say B6 times 0.05, and that would give me 5%. Both of these ways would work perfectly, but the way that I would do it if I want to use a percent symbol, which is the way that we're going to look at now, is I'd say equals B6 times 5%. Because whenever you put a percent symbol next to a number in Excel, it just moves decimal place by 2 spaces, just like that calculation there. And so what that'll do is that'll give me 5% of B6. So, yeah, that looks rubbish. Let me do it like that. There we go. So those are 3 different calculations, and this is what they work like. If I say equals B6 divided by 100 times 5, you can look at that and go, oh, I don't need brackets. Well, do I need brackets? BODMAS, D for division, M for multiplication. No, I don't need brackets. It's all in the right order. I can just hit return with a completely cavalier attitude. If I'd said equals B6 times 0.05, that would give me exactly the same result. But the way to use the percent symbol to get the percentage, to get 5% of that total figure, will be to say equals B6, when I've got a total figure in it, and then say times 5%. And when I hit return, I get 5%. And then I can also fill it all the way across and it gives me the correct answers. You don't need to use the percent symbol because you can do it with normal maths. But other people other people use it, so you need to know how it works. So if you wanted to add 10% to that figure there, E2, you wouldn't say equals E2 plus 10%, because that would just give you gibberish. Instead, you say equals E2 times 110%, which will give you 61.5 or whatever it is. Yeah, 61.6, I mean. I knew that, because it's rounded up. But if you want to take 10% off of it, you just say E2 times 90%. Or you would say, if you didn't want to do the hefty calculation of turning 10% into 90%, you could just say E2 times 10% to get 10%, and then say E2 minus, open brackets, that calculation, and that would take 10% off. So working with percentages is easy, as long as you remember that you only ever multiply by them. Anything else will give you results that you're not expecting. And then finally, I'm just going to do something else. Once I've broken my spreadsheet completely, I'm going to put the percent in that cell there, and I'm going to change my spreadsheet so that rather than say B6 multiplied by 5%, it's going to say B6 multiplied by A10. And when I hit return, it gives me the same result. It's like, yeah, that's really useful. Why did you bother doing that? I did that so that I could change the percentage and see the effect of different percentages. Yay. And now if I autofill it across, it'll all go horribly wrong. Because the cell's moved. It's now looking at the wrong one. Well, it's half looking at the wrong one. The blue one's in the correct place, but the red one isn't. So to make it look at the red cell and stay stuck on that, I need to leave the blue bit, that bit there, as a relative reference, but change the red bit so it's an absolute reference. And if you want to know more about absolute referencing, I know I've explained it previously, but I'll explain it in detail if you ask, if you want to see it. But if you don't, I'll just show you a quick way of doing it is to click in the middle of the reference, press the F4 key, and that'll put the dollars in. First dollar locks the A, the next dollar locks the 10, and then when I hit return, that's locked on A10, and I can auto-fill it across, as if by magic it works a treat. And there I can see we've got blue bit multiplied by red bit, and if I change that to 10%, then it'll work a treat like so. And it's as easy as that. That is everything you can expect in the basic course, crammed into an hour, all but the formatting. So, any questions or requests or anything else you'd like to do? Nothing but tumbleweeds.
It's fine, thank you.
All right, good. Thank you, Doug. Brilliant, good. I'm pleased that I'm getting positive responses on the chat window. There's a whole week of wonderful things we can do next week. If anyone's got any requests, now's a great time to ask. If you can't think of anything, then on Monday I'll just do formatting in Excel. But if there's anything you'd like to see, either let me know now or let me know before next week. But I'm thinking of doing Excel formatting on Monday, which is kind of the next step in the basic lessons after this. And then maybe we'll go back to Word on Tuesday and do some macros and some things that are a bit more technical, and then some advanced Excel later in the week. I'll probably even do a bit of Microsoft Access, feeling really daring. But if you've got any requests or if there's anything you would like to see or any questions at all about anything, just ask or email me or just call the office. Any of those methods is absolutely fine. But thanks for attending today.